Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about the lessons I've learned from designing Netflix's experimentation platform. So I'm going to start with a quick survey. We're going to use the reactions menu in Zoom. So bottom bar, it's going to either use the green check for yes or the red X for no, or you can use chat if that's more comfortable for you. Okay, so first question, how many of you use Netflix? Do you use Netflix, yes or no? Okay, see if your response is coming in. Awesome. I'm gonna adjust my formatting here a little bit. Okay, great. Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, next question. For those of you who said yes, have you ever noticed any differences between your Netflix experience and someone else's? Okay, I think this is probably not super common because most people aren't going to sit there and compare their experiences with somebody else. Okay, awesome. Thanks for playing. So even if you weren't aware of it, chances are if you are a Netflix subscriber, you've been in an A/B test. So what's an A/B test? I know Consuelo just mentioned this previously, but in a very simplified nutshell, A/B testing is when you have two virtually identical populations and you show them different experiences. So let's say experience A and experience B. And then everyone's behavior is measured and compared so that we know which experience is better. And Netflix has been running A/B tests for more than 20 years now to inform product decisions. So that includes anything from the UI changes to algorithms and new firmware updates. That's how we've gone from this UI in 2010 to the more immersive and video forward one in 2022. Now, you might be asking, well, why should we do A/B testing at all? Well, we've found that it is a better decision method than basically any of the other options. And you're like, well, okay, so what are the other options? Like there's a few out there I can think of and they all have pitfalls. So the first one, maybe you can copy competitors. Okay, so that's fine, but how would you ever be the first to innovate or try something? And the other thing to think about is your competitor's user base even the same as yours? Right? So the assumptions that they're making might not be ones that apply for you. So copy competitors, it's not really great. Second one, maybe you can listen to the HIPPO principle, right? Highest paid person's opinion. So that could work, but one person, even if they're paid a lot of big bucks, might not be right. Even if you solicit like a panel of experts and you ask them for their best guess. That's only a few people there still that get to contribute their ideas, and it's still relying on their intuition instead of relying on data. So okay, more data. What if we measure the effect of your feature after you've launched it? Okay, well, so that is more data-based, but you'd be unable to separate the causal effect of launching your new feature from basically anything else that happened at the same time, whether that's a global pandemic, Super Bowl, maybe just Taco Tuesday, right? So A/B testing addresses all of those pitfalls, and that's why it's critical to Netflix's success. It lets us try out crazy ideas. It sometimes proves, the CEO wrong. And it provides hard evidence on what our members like and what they dislike, which ultimately means that our members get to vote on how the Netflix product evolves. But I'm not here to talk about any of those individual A/B tests today. Instead, I work on the platform that enables all of this experimentation for Netflix. And today I'm here to talk about that experience. So hi, my name is Rina Chang, pronouns she, her. And I've been at Netflix for almost 10 years now. I'm the UI UX designer who owns all of the UIs for the experimentation platform, which is a suite of products that is used by Netflix employees to run experiments like A/B tests. The team I work on consists of both front-end and back-end designers, as well as data scientists, one product manager, and one designer, which is me. My job is to make A/B testing accessible for everybody at Netflix. So this means that I'm responsible for this very not sexy form that people use to set up their tests. And this has to be as easy and as intuitive as I can make a bunch of configuration fields so that people don't screw up their tests before they even start it. This also means that I have to ensure what gets built actually makes sense to the people who are making decisions so that they can figure out what happened to that test and therefore what to do next. Sometimes my design work looks like this. So this is making it really stupidly obvious to a data scientist that you're in a feature branch and not in prod because it looks really different. And other times my work also looks like this, which is translating code to a UI, hopefully making it more understandable. And still other times my work looks like this, which is synthesizing a bunch of information that I've gathered over the years into an infographic so that the team can align on a common understanding of what we're trying to do and also where are the opportunities for improvement. I don't work on anything that a Netflix subscriber sees. But the work that I do is critical to helping those people deliver a better product to those Netflix consumers. For those of you who don't work on internal facing products, I find that they're really different from consumer facing products in a number of ways. Firstly, we are not trying to maximize profits with our product. Our goal is to enable people to scale, so working more efficiently, more accurately, and on the things that actually matter the most. Secondly, obviously, our users are employees, right? So working on a product for your coworkers means that your users are really easily accessible. You can talk directly to them without having to go through, any of the hoops of formal user research. On the other hand, because they are your employees, sometimes you have to navigate bureaucracy. You have to wait to get prioritized on other people's roadmaps, or you have to get their agreement on your roadmap. Okay, number 3, our users are highly technical, and there are a lot of different kinds of them, right? So the users of the experimentation platform range from engineers to data scientists, product managers, designers, and more, right? So most of these users are pretty set in their jargon. They don't have a lot of time to spend learning our product, but they do have to use it to set up their tests and run them and make those decisions. So our bar for having an intuitive product is just as high as a consumer product. And number 4, our users are invested in our product. So I like to joke that they're a captive audience, right? In that our products is basically the only way they have to, do their jobs, unless they, feel like building themselves an alternative. So they're not going to cancel our products the way that people cancel subscriptions. But that does mean that they're going to be really loud when something doesn't work for them, and they're going to be very opinionated on exactly how they think it should work. Of course, that can become a big problem. Most of the time, your users and your coworkers are thinking like consumers or just humans do, right? They're going to say, I want this, or why can't you do that for me? And even your teammates, they'll throw out ideas on how to improve something, but they won't necessarily tell you what they're solving for or why. So you have to pull it out of them, pull out what they need and why they need it out of what they're saying. So this sounds very familiar, right? This is a classic user research problem. But we get tripped up a lot, though, because these are our coworkers and you expect them, you kind of assume that they have the same context that we do, but in actuality, they don't, right? Most of the time they're asking for that faster horse instead of a faster means of transportation, because that's what they know, that's what they've been exposed to. And, the other thing that makes this complicated is that they're going to ask for what they want. But because I work on a platform team, we actually take what they want and what this other vertical wants and what that other vertical wants and how they all do their different types of testing. We have to figure out what's the common ground between all of them and try to design for that. So this is my first lesson, which is you need to listen really, really well. You have to listen beyond what's simply being asked for. You have to listen through the noise to get to the true why that's underneath. So yeah, that's kind of obvious. This is classic design thinking, right? But this is a case where you really have to live it, right? You have to apply it to your coworkers because they're your users. So here's an example. So this is our main A/B testing tool. This is called the Blaze. It has a page where it shows all the analysis results from your A/B tests. And you can click on the filters on the left side to change the subset of data that you're looking at. And a lot of our users complain about this being slow. So we're like, okay, so what are you trying to do here? And it turns out that people were going through all the different countries in this filter on the left so that they could compare the results of those countries. And they would choose a country, hit apply, wait for the data to load, look at the results. Pick another country, hit apply, wait. And it's quite tedious when you're looking at like 20 countries to see if one of them behaved differently. So yeah, I could see why our users would complain about this being slow. On the other hand, now that we actually knew that they were looking for anomalies, we could serve that up better. So we added this functionality. This is called heterogeneous treatment effects. And this gives our users the ability to see all the results split up by a single dimension. So how you read this, each column is an experience and each row here is a country. And you can see, this column that's got a lot of green in it, it's doing pretty well, right? This experience, most of our users are liking it. And this, when you look at it this way, looking at these countries, you can see, hey, some of these countries aren't doing well. They're consistently red in multiple experiences, or there's really far to the left, which is like negative, right? So what's going on with these countries? So this solution and this way of presenting the data is not only faster than clicking through, but it's also more flexible because you can do this by country, device type, payment method, whatever else. And this is also statistically better than manually comparing analyses before, because this implements multiple hypothesis correction. So yeah, I just said the word multiple hypothesis correction in a talk about design. So that actually leads me to my second lesson, which is learn beyond design. So in a situation like mine, when you're working on an internal product, there's basically no way to succeed if you just stay inside your design lane, like in the UI, right? You need to know a little bit something about the challenges that your coworkers are facing, so you can develop some empathy and not be that, pie in the sky designer whose work can't actually be built. You have to learn about your product end to end. So you have to know, how is the data flowing from the logs into tables, and then it gets aggregated and transformed, then it lands in more tables, which your backend service then reads and then takes that data and adds stats on top of it, and then makes it into data viz, and it finally lands in your UI. Right? So if your users are complaining that this is slow, where exactly in that entire flow are things getting held up? And in order to help your users accomplish their goals, you have to really understand them. And that means learning terminology, systems, or skills that are beyond the design craft. And you'll have to figure out what kind of pitfalls are they likely to face and get ahead of that. Okay, another story. Back when I started working on experimentation, the analysis portion wasn't in the same product as the setup portion. And we were working on integrating these two into a single product. And I was conducting user research on the analysis UI to figure out which features needed to be brought over and what could be dropped. One of the features of the old UI was that it showed a colored background for when the results were significant and a border for when it was leaning significant based on the p-value. Okay, so what's a p-value? The explanation is actually quite technical, and that is the probability of seeing results as extreme as what is being observed if experiences A and B were the same. Okay, so that's very technical. I don't even know if most statisticians, hopefully they understand this. It's kind of confusing, so I'm going to go for a simpler but maybe slightly inaccurate version, which is the result is more likely to be real as the p-value gets closer to 0, with a small amount of chance that it could still not be real. Okay, so mostly looking at p-value going to 0, that's good. So back to our UI. Our UI, it's showing a background color if that p-value is less than some random threshold we set, 0.005. Okay, p-value smaller than that, it's pretty close to 0. We're going to give it a colored background. And we're going to give it a color based on red or green, right? Which is either it's bad or it's good. So let's say if the metric is revenue, going up, good, going down, bad, right? Green, red. Okay, so that is basically statistically significant, and a lot of our product managers will make their decision based on this coloring. The old UI that we were going to port over also showed that same color as a thick border whenever the p-value was less than 0.15. So they call this leaning statistically significant. And while I was doing the user interviews, I had product managers telling me that they would make decisions based on this coloring, this leaning statistically significant, if it was basically the only color they saw on that page. But when I talked to the statisticians about this, they absolutely hated it. To them, it was like making decisions based on just like pure randomness or just noise, right? So I decided, if our goal is to help people make good decisions, then we should get rid of these colored borders because they're not helping. And there were a lot of product managers who really hated that call, and it was quite controversial. But at the end of the day, we pushed forward and we got rid of them because we believed it was the right thing to do. So it's been gone for many years now, and honestly, nobody's missed it. Okay, so enough about stats. We're done with stats for the rest of the talk. I feel like I mostly learned stats through osmosis because there's a lot of mathy people on my team, whereas I'm the only designer. And because I'm the only designer in my entire org, actually, which is almost 500 people, I have to make sure I'm representing both design as a craft as well as a way of thinking. So in addition to designing the actual things that show up on my product, I do a little bit of consulting for data scientists who need a little bit of help. So here's a few examples. This one was, they were trying to use color gradients, and I was like, this color gradient's not really helpful here because people can't tell the difference between, that slight shade of green, yellowy, maybe sometimes slightly red, right? So color gradients in this case, not really helpful. Here's another example. Somebody was putting together an app to try to show a new way of doing analysis. So I provided a lot of design feedback on, tighten up the wording here, get rid of some of these interactions, that's kind of a thing. But I actually spend way more of my time advocating for design thinking. So this is teaching my teammates how to ask users non-leading questions, or modeling for them how to ask the 5 whys when talking to a user in order to get to actual root cause. And also speaking up in technical discussions on why I think a user would or wouldn't understand something. And this leads me to lesson number 3, share your opinion. So when working on a technical product, it's really easy for a designer to assume, I don't know anything about the tech side, or I don't want to ask stupid questions, right? But the best ideas come from having a diversity of opinions and backgrounds. And even if you don't really understand all of the little details, if you've learned, some of what they're doing, you've learned a little bit outside of the design craft, you should just go with your gut feeling. If you feel like something's kind of off, it's important to be curious. So go ahead and ask your questions, but also present why you're asking so your teammate doesn't feel attacked and you're challenging their technical ability, but rather they can see you're trying to achieve this goal. Let me work with you to deliver that great experience and solve these problems. Okay, so I've shown the analysis side of our A/B testing product so far, but my team also handles the test setup and configuration. So one of our products is a experience management tool. So this is aimed at the software engineers who are actually building the customer-facing experiences. Back when the original software architect, was thinking about how he designed the system, we had a lot of discussions about how it would work with A/B testing. All of our tests have a numerical ID associated with it, and oftentimes developers will just hard code that ID into the product. So here's an example. Let's say somebody wanted to test button colors in the UI. So they would create a test in our system. Let's say it gets a test ID of 1, 2, 3. The engineer would then say, okay, we've got a default red button. So I'm going to say this is red button, test ID 1, 2, 3, experience A. And then we've got blue button. This will be test 1, 2, 3, experience B, right? And previously, I had been learning from some of my teammates about better statistical practices, and that you could actually do better analysis if you knew how two experiences were related. So I suggested to the architect, well, what if instead the future knew it was in an A/B test, but not necessarily which one? So instead of having this red button, being 1, 2, 3 A and the blue button being 1, 2, 3 B, maybe both buttons would just know I'm in an A/B test. And then our system would figure out exactly which one it was. And I saw the light bulb go off in the architect's head. This would enable people to change what's basically a cumbersome practice today, right? Which is they had to change code and check it in and deploy it when they discovered a bug, right? And they had to assign it a new test number. It also enabled mixing and matching of a bunch of different experiences. So if they wanted to run follow-up tests, they could do so really easily. So maybe test 1, 2, 3 were those 2 buttons, and then you're like, okay, red button won, let's try these other buttons. Or maybe this other button, right? See which one of these works better. This makes the analysis much more powerful. And so that's an example where somebody actually listened to my opinion. But as you can imagine, that Doesn't always happen, right? There's times when you get overruled. So same software architect, same experience management product, but he was firmly convinced that because this was a tool that was only going to be used by software engineers, there's no need to have a UI. So I expressed my opinion. I thought that, oftentimes a UI does make things easier, more understandable than looking at code. But, he wanted to move fast. He didn't want to waste time on it since he thought it was unnecessary. So I was like, okay, that's your choice. I backed off. So fast forward a couple years later, with many engineers having adopted this product, and what are they asking for to make their lives easier? A UI. So being right in this example helps build my credibility, and it makes it more likely that somebody would listen to me in the future. But ultimately, I think the important part of this story is not that I was right, but that I expressed my opinion, and also I respected his opinion. Of course, there are times I do get it wrong, and that leads me to lesson number 4, which is own your mistakes. We can't always be right, and that's okay. But it's important to recognize when you made a mistake and learn from it and fix it. This actually contributes to your credibility possibly more than being right does. No one expects you to be perfect, but the team needs everyone to be responsible. So next story. We have yet another product that helps our users automate their A/B testing workflow. So I thought it's pretty simple. Users want to set up the test, build the experiences, QA the experiences, run the test on real people, read the results, and then make a decision. Right? That's really straightforward. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, well, the team said, okay, well, that's called the push model. And there's this thing called a pull model that's much more powerful. And you could say, well, the outcome I want is to make a decision. Now go get me all the rest of the things that it takes to do that. And I was like, wait, what? Like that's so backwards, right? That's such a back-end engineer's way of thinking about things. Super hard to understand. Our users don't need that complexity. If you're really, you're going to die on that hill, you have to build the back-end that way, like fine, do that. But in the UI, it could just look like the push model. You start from 1, 2, and go all the way down, right? So the team's like, okay, you're the design expert, you're the user expert. Let's just build it your way. And so they built what I designed. And then we got real users and real use cases. And those use cases were so much more complicated than what I had thought they were going to be. So I learned, I'm so wrong. There were a lot of situations where the test setup, went wrong, the QA allocation, they found a bug, something didn't get planned for, something got added in, something else got removed, right? So that this linear UI that I had made it more confusing than what happened when and what happened as a result of, something else, right? So I heard this, I went back to the team and I told them, okay, it sounds like this UI isn't working. We should probably just scrap this and we can create a new view using that display that they had mentioned to me before. And the team agreed, and they're like, well, you don't have to, totally get rid of your old UI, right? Our users were trying to understand the order in which things happened and not just the, what led to what else, right? So maybe the current UI could be converted to a timeline view and can keep both of them. So that's an example where I made the wrong call and the team didn't judge me for it. Instead, they leaned into listening to our users and partnering with me to create a better product because they felt, at the end of the day, they are also responsible for the end-to-end experience, and it's not just on me. So you could probably tell from what I've said so far that I'm a very practical designer, more so than an artistic one. And I like getting other people's ideas and incorporating them into my work. And I really like getting super deeply involved in what our users are trying to do and how our product works or doesn't. I'm also the kind of person who tries to coach my teammates to ask why whenever they get a feature request. I organize classes on experimentation. I make ridiculous illustrations for t-shirts. I also write project planning milestone docs and code and SQL queries to help people in our support channel. And so all of this to say, my last lesson here for you today is own your role. So I can do all of those things and like paint way outside of the lines because I work at Netflix. And you may have heard of Netflix's culture of freedom and responsibility. We say it's the freedom to do what you want, but the responsibility to do the right thing. So I came to Netflix because of this culture. When I was first talking to Netflix, the role was for a designer for the customer service product, and it reported to the product manager on the customer service team. And the engineers who worked on it reported elsewhere. And I said, well, it seems really weird not to sit with the engineers because like I kind of gotta know how the thing works, right? And so the recruiter took that feedback, they went back to the team. And then the next time I chatted with them, the role was now reporting to the engineering manager of that team instead of the customer service side, which I felt like was a better fit for me and would also make me able to actually do my work better. So speaking up in that instance, for what I wanted, it paid off for me. Before Netflix, I pivoted through a few companies to try to find the right fit and the right role. So some places wanted me to do more product management. Some places wanted me to do more engineering. At some places, I was a junior designer, and other places I was training junior designers. Even while I was at Netflix, I actually pivoted from a design role that was for that customer service product as well as experimentation. To being the full-time product manager / designer for the experimentation platform. And I tried that for a bit and I got some battle scars, and I decided, you know what, I'd rather be a full-time designer, maybe only a little bit of a product manager on the side. So I learned through all this experience that I wasn't interested in doing PM or engineering as my job, but that I also really hated telling other designers what to work on, and that I also really liked doing the design work, but not 100% of the time. I also learned what values mattered the most to me. I really valued working with people who cared as much as I did about doing the right thing, and who didn't care, like me, about the boxes that we were all supposed to fit into. I learned that while I thought consumer-facing products were all shiny and glamorous, I actually really enjoyed working on the complexities that come with internal products. One of the things I loved about Netflix when I started was that Netflix didn't have levels for individual contributors. And so that was like taking the pressure off of having to climb the corporate ladder. I could just focus on doing great work, and I didn't have to worry about networking or playing politics in order to succeed. And speaking of quotes around succeeding, I also learned that you don't have to conform to some like idealized career path in order to be successful. So after a lot of soul searching, I decided I didn't want to be a manager because I liked solving problems myself. And honestly, I wasn't that inspired by coaching or mentoring. And most importantly, I learned through all of this, it's okay to take the time and figure out what matters the most to you. And that can change as you go. So whether that means pivoting through companies or roles or locations, I think if you're interested in it, even remotely, just try it out. But what I'm trying to say at the end of all of this is don't ever feel like you're confined to any boxes or labels, right? Always keep growing, and it's worth it to figure out and learn about yourself. And at the end of the day, as cliche as it sounds, how to accept yourself for how you are. Okay, so to recap, my name is Rina. I work at a very complex internal product at Netflix. And because of that work, I think these lessons I've learned have helped me become successful. So listen really, really well, ask why about everything, figure out what makes people tick. Learn beyond design, even when you think it's really hard, like stats, right? Just try, you might be surprised. Share your opinion. The world would be really boring if we all thought the same way. Your voice matters, so speak up. Own your mistakes. We're all going to make them. You might as well not be ashamed of them and use them to grow. And finally, own your role. So what works for someone else might not necessarily work for you. Take the time to try and figure things out, figure out what's worth spending your time and your energy on. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rina. That was great. Do you have time for a couple of questions?
Yeah. Sorry, I went a little longer.
That's okay. That's completely okay.
Okay, sorry, multiple screens. Okay, for those who don't have access to a robust A/B testing platforms, any alternative ways or hacky ways to mimic the value of the A/B test? There are a lot of, I think, consumer-facing A/B testing platforms out there that could be used. I think like Optimizely, things like that. It's really difficult to do any other kind of data extrapolation if you don't have that system set up, though, because there's a lot of, I think, stats things involved in actually randomizing who's in the test and making sure that they're seeing the right thing. So I guess just like sum up my answer, I think there's some consumer facing stuff out there that you could look at and try to implement. from everything you learn, how do you share those learnings or insights to everyone across Netflix? Do you have some sort of repository? Okay, so Netflix has a very strong culture of debate. So any kind of A/B test that is like, impactful, they actually have a forum, 3 forums, I think, depending on the vertical that they're in, where the product managers will bring the results of their A/B tests, and they have a huge debate about what should we do. People challenge the results of, like, did you look at this? Maybe this is the problem. And yeah, they make a huge debate. We're actually working on making a better repository. Right now, it's a little bit organic, but I'm working with a team that is trying to put together something that's a little bit more searchable. Right now, it's kind of like you have to remember what that test was called and then like go find it internally.